Welcome to another episode of Inspired Voices. My name is Riera, and today we have again Mr. Jared Boyette.
That's right. Good to be back.
Absolutely. For those of you who, yes. Your episode was season 3. Your episode was season 3, episode 15.
Okay.
I'll link the episode below for those of you who want to rewatch it or watch it for the first time. But thank you, man, for being here.
It's great to be on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love watching the show.
Appreciate it, man. To give people a little rundown, you're a fitness guy, right? So how would you describe to people what you do?
Yeah, the best way to describe myself is a health fitness specialist. The reason why I call myself that is my role as a coach, as a trainer. I do one-on-one training, small group training, large group classes, active metabolic assessments, resting metabolic assessments, some nutritional work, and I think that's about it.
Okay.
But anything in the health and fitness field, that's kind of what I do. So it's hard to say you're just a one-on-one strength coach.
There's more to it than that, right?
Yeah, more to it.
I want to kind of continue this conversation of fitness and health and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about common fitness myths and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of talk out there.
Yeah.
And we kind of want to distinguish what's actually true.
Yeah.
What's scientifically true, and what's not. So when we're talking about like cardio, right? Main thing people say is cardio, lose weight, and stuff like that. Now I have a few friends who actually say the opposite, right? They say weight training is what's gonna make you lose weight. So, but what is the thing that's gonna lose weight?
I'm a little biased in that comment. I do think personally that more weight training is going to allow you to lose more weight, but to dig a little deeper in that sense, I think you can lose weight from both. I think it depends on the individual. I think it depends on your diet. That's the biggest thing, like what you're consuming,
Right.
Because if you take two individuals that are going through the exact same workout plan, but their diet's different, they're polar opposite, there's probably going to be one that's got more benefit than the other, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the diet, various things, hormones. I mean, we can go down a rabbit hole in various things. I do think there's more benefits to more of a weight training style or program. I think you're going to get the best of both worlds because you're still kind of hitting cardio. I think if the training's right, if you're training right through weight training, your heart rate's still going to get in the zone 2 or zone 3, right? That's kind of what you want. 80% of fat burn is in zone 1 anyways, roughly.
What is zone 1? Is that like in the muscles or something like that? Or?
Yeah, well,
like,
it's not necessarily in the muscles necessarily. So you have 5 different zones.
Okay.
Zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Zone 5 is very, very, very rare, and it's based off your heart rate zones, and individuals are different, right, through their heart rate zones. Zone 1 is where you're going to see most of your fat burning, or at least you should. Zone 2, you're going to see a little bit less. Zone 3, you're going to see a little bit less. And by the time you get to zone 4, you're probably going to see just mostly glycogen stores being burned up.
Gotcha. So the zones are the progression of losing fat?
Yes, to an extent. So you do burn more calories through a higher zone. So an individual is going to burn more calories per minute through like a zone 4. Doesn't mean it's good calories though. That's where that lactic threshold comes into play. That's where you fatigue, you crash through that like zone 4 type training.
Gotcha.
But zone 1, you can tend to do a little bit longer. You're going to burn more fat. Zone 2 and zone 3, you're going to burn fat, but probably just not as much. So through weight training, you're going to be in all 3 of those zones essentially, may even taper into a zone 4. It really depends on your style of training, the type of heart rate that you would get in cardio. Now cardio is great. I'm a fan of cardio. I do my share of cardio. We talked on our last show, our last podcast about the importance of metabolic conditioning, where it's just a little bit shorter and sweet. It could be anywhere from 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes long, depending on the individual and how much time they have, where you'll see a lot of benefit. So cardio is great. There's different forms of Metcon, but I recommend adding some weight training in there too, so you can get more benefit through that style of training.
Yeah. And then like, you know, people talk about like, not just using cardio as a weight loss, but like, also fasting too.
Yeah. Fasting cardio.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. There's actually, quite a few studies that's been done through fasted cardio. The whole concept behind fasted cardio makes sense. I've done my share of it. I know people still do. It's an old school style of cardio. And that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to calories in versus calories out. So if you're not eating breakfast, but you're doing cardio on top of that, you're probably going to burn a good share of calories.
So you're saying like it is effective?
I think it's effective in terms of the nutritional side. Not eating breakfast until later, if that makes sense, because you're going longer, if that makes sense. Yeah. But you don't necessarily have to do that to lose weight. They've done various studies on individuals who ate breakfast, rested at a proper time, and then did cardio or did their workout, and saw just as much benefit as individuals who did fasted cardio over time.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to necessarily do fasted cardio. If somebody does and they're very adamant about it and it makes them feel better, then that's fine too.
Maybe it's like a psychological thing.
It's a psychological thing, right? And like I said, it comes down to the eating too. So like an individual that kind of skips breakfast or eats breakfast later on, they're kind of doing like an intermittent fasting. So there's probably going to be some form of benefit to that, I'm sure. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to somebody to say, oh, you have to do fasted cardio. There's a lot of benefit to it. There's not necessarily that much benefit to it. Because maybe a little bit, but not much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like when I think about it, it's like, oh, so you're not you're not eating before a workout or in the beginning of the day. You're working out on an empty stomach, which means you're probably going to be burning the fat reservoirs in your to get that energy and stuff like that, and that's what's going to lose the weight kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and that was the whole thought behind it years ago.
Gotcha.
And to an extent, it does, but not enough to make a drastic change.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you know you're a big proponent of lifting weights, right, and stuff like that. When it comes to, well, first off, like, you know, they say. I know some fighters. I had a fighter on here, and he was talking about how he doesn't lift heavy weights because over time it does a number on your joints. And stuff like that. Is that?
He has a point. I mean, there is studies that do show that. You do want to be careful. If you remember on the last podcast, we chatted about the main focus of the eccentric portion of the movement. Right. Remember I was talking about the tempo and the eccentric portion. I think that's more important. Even for myself, I don't lift as heavy as I used to. I've scaled down quite a bit. However, I do a good share of tempo style training. Tempo where I'm focused on the eccentric portioning, the lowering phase, the stretching of the muscle fibers, and then time under tension. And I think in terms of muscle growth, you'll see a good deal of muscle growth from that.
Yeah.
But being to an extent, he's right. But I think it depends. I think if your joints are strong, you have good foundation work, I think you're okay over time. The biggest thing is just listen to your body, see how you're feeling.
Yeah.
If it feels like your joints are hurting or it's leading to injury, you might need to scale back or reevaluate on some type of training.
Right.
Because it's hard to say that, Oliver, although I do agree with it, but I have some clients 65, 72, and even 83, and they are really strong. They still love their weight training, heavy weight training too.
Oh, really?
And they're fine. They have no injuries. They're perfectly fine. In fact, it makes them feel better, and they've seen a lot of benefit through muscle growth through that.
So interesting.
I think it depends. It just as long as your joints are healthy and you're recovering proper, it can be okay.
Well, I was gonna ask, like, oh, is it like the older you get, the more you should just do high reps, lower weights, stuff like that.
Maybe we just need to evaluate all of our training. Just do cardio all the time.
Right, yeah. But you're saying it just depends on the person and how your body feels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, now, when it comes to women, I know a lot of women say that they don't want to lose, they don't want to lift weights because they don't want to become bulky.
Yeah, it's common. It's really common.
Yeah.
Not as common as it used to be, though. I feel like maybe it is. I don't know.
I feel like
I don't get it.
It's becoming less of a thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And exercise science is the youngest science. I mean, we are still finding out so much about this. I mean, it's
really. It's the youngest?
It seems like it is, and I've heard that before, and to an extent it is. I mean, even educational-wise now, individuals are getting more exercise science degrees, whereas before it might have been just strictly biology or chemistry or whatever the science degree may have been. Yeah. It's just we're finding so much about it. It's becoming more popular now,
right.
Over the last decade. Rightfully so, we see the benefits of it. But in terms of women getting too bulky from weight training, I always say this, that's about equivalent to saying, I don't want to learn how to drive because I'm afraid I'll become a NASCAR driver.
Okay.
I mean, to an extent.
Right.
There's no evidence in that. It goes back to the diet and hormones. The only time you're going to really become bulky and put on too much weight is probably your diet. You know, now if you are lifting really heavy and you're eating a large sum of calories, then yeah, you're probably going to get bulky and put on some weight. But if your diet's reasonable, you're following the guidelines, and you're doing weight training throughout the week, 3 or 4 days a week, hitting the weights hard, it is actually more beneficial for women to weight train than it is males, believe it or not. Now, although I do highly suggest that males weight train, but women tend to get osteoporosis more as they age in their 70s, maybe even their 80s. And osteoporosis comes down to bone density, weight-bearing exercise on the bone.
Right.
So they're finding individuals who weight train, women weight train, are less prone to that. And there is strong evidence in that. So I recommend women to weight train more than anything, whereas guys might need to do more cardio more so than women. I think both are good, but I would recommend women, I strongly suggest they do weight training, weight-bearing exercise for sure.
And I think it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
When you're first starting off weight training, it might seem like you're gaining weight, but eventually you start to slim down if the nutrition is there, right?
Yeah. Some of it, I don't know. It could be from inflammation, but and it just could simply come down to diet too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've always felt like that was a thing. Like you just you might seem like you're bulking up, but eventually that'll come down or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't really paid too much mind to that. Yeah.
From my personal experience.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of nutrition and all that stuff, I know you're not a nutritionist, right? But you do have a lot of insight into the health and fitness realm. Can you out-train a bad diet?
No, I've tried it for years.
Yeah. It's what's kind of like held you back.
The injuries and not reaching your goals.
I didn't even think about like causing injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's the main form of recovery through hydration and protein, adequate protein.
Right.
I think if adequate protein, if an individual focuses on 3 things, now obviously there's a lot of things, but I try to educate people on the simplicity of in every single meal, make sure you have proper protein. Protein is so important. We don't get enough protein. We might get enough protein, but it's just like in one bulk and not through every meal, which makes that meal complete. And fiber. Fiber is a big thing too. We don't get enough fiber. I try to focus on those, even for myself, and I recommend it for all my clients and individuals that may ask, viewers that may ask. I recommend protein and fiber, and of course hydration, water, or any other form of liquid that's similar.
So protein, fiber, and hydration.
Hydration. That is like, I mean, obviously, like I said, people will be like, well, there's so much more. I agree. There is a lot more to nutrition, but in terms of like simplicity, that's a key in having a good foundation, at least in recovery and growth.
Yeah. I feel like I've talked to a few people who like went to a nutritionist and they told them how much protein they need to have and stuff like that. And that seems like such a high number.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you, like, it seems difficult just to reach that protein number. And it's like, I don't know. It's like you have to have a complete lifestyle change almost.
Yeah, that's a great point. And nowadays, it wouldn't be a bad idea, depending on their diet and how much they're eating and their time, it wouldn't be a bad idea to supplement some protein. That's the beauty of protein shakes, whether it's whey protein, vegan protein, or collagen. That's the good thing about supplementing that in is, you know, hypothetically, you do 2 extra shakes a day throughout your day, whether it be for breakfast or it be for post-workout. That could be roughly 80 extra grams of protein, 40 and 40, or even at least 60, 30 and 30. So that gives you a good amount, good chunk of protein. Although I do recommend have those sources of protein be through your diet naturally, through good meat and Greek yogurt, whatever your protein source is. But if it takes supplementing some form of protein powder, that helps a good deal.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Because, I think I do that sometimes as well, as the supplement, the shakes and stuff like that. I get 24 grams in a shake. And like, perfect. Plus I'm putting like chia seeds in there.
Yeah, there you go.
And a banana.
Yeah.
And
chia seeds
and blueberries.
Chia seeds and blueberries right there. That's a ton of fiber. There you go, man. You're on it.
I'm on it, bro. I'm in the bathroom like a stallion.
That's right.
Now, we touched on this a little bit in the last podcast. We talked about stretching, right? Talked about warming up properly and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to the end of the workout, cool down and stuff like that, well, what do you suggest as far as like, is it stretching again, you know, or is it just like, I don't know, what consists of a cool down?
Yeah, so so I always say, I mean, you can do both, especially now that we're finding it's a little different now, because now even for myself, I'll do a little bit of static stretching in my warm up. Not all the time. Most of it, my rule of thumb is mobility in your warm up to start your workout. So if you remember, mobility is stretching through movement, repetitions. In your cool down, obviously there's various cool downs, but in terms of your cool down after your workout is more static stretching. So that's where your stretches are going to be 30 to 60, maybe even 90 seconds long through 2 or 3 sets, based off your muscle group. So mobility more so in the first of the workout. And then I would have more flexibility, more static stretching at the end. That's kind of my rule of thumb. Now, like I said, you can do static probably before, at least a little bit, 30 seconds, especially if you're stiff. But if there's like a rule of thumb, I would focus on that, mobility, static stretching at the end.
Yeah, I think I find that I only need one. Well, actually, okay, I'll take this. So like when in the beginning of the workout, when I'm doing my warm up and stretch, I forgot what you call it, where you're on one knee and you have the calf against the wall.
Oh yeah, hip flexor stretch.
Hip flexor stretch, right? So like for me, that's great for my knee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've come to find that I do that 2 minutes each leg before a workout, do my workout, boom, good. But I find that when I go home and I'm going up the stairs, like it's a little bit crunchy. It's a little, it feels a little tight or something like that, you know? So sometimes I have to actually do that again after the workout. And stuff like that.
Yeah, and it may take that. It may take that. It may even take, this is unfortunate, but sometimes there's situations where you stretch later in the day. So if you have more of a morning workout, it wouldn't be a bad idea to hours later in the day, whether it's in the evening when you're settling down, to get a couple more stretches in.
Oh, it's actually not a bad deal.
Yeah, it's hard to do though. You know, you have obligations, and the last thing you want to do, you're like, all right, worked out, I don't need to stretch. But it does help with recovery.
Yeah, recovery especially.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I need to start implementing that.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Especially when people are, sitting down all day and stuff like that. You know, they work out in the morning, but then they're sitting down all day. Yeah. They need to move their body again. Do you think it's like do you think they have to start from ground zero?
To stretch?
Yeah. Well, after they work out in the morning, sit down all day. It's like that workout. I mean, it was good, but like, is it useless when they're sitting down all day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's useless. I
don't think useless was the right word, but
yeah. But no, that makes sense. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
No, I recommend I call it desk jockey. You know, sitting at a desk in a chair, which is really common. Rounded shoulders. Take some time out of the day, especially if you're trying to make some health changes, right? Health and fitness changes. The biggest thing is to try to implement those throughout your workday. I know for my clients, I have a series of movements that I recommend them doing. A foam roller is key. Having a foam roller to work your thoracic spine. You've done your share of that with Bobby and Lori, I'm sure. But having those corrective type stretches throughout your day, and it can only be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be super long. Be short and sweet. But any tightness you feel, try to condition your mind. I mean, even if you're letting food warm up in the microwave and you've been sitting at the desk for 4 or 5, maybe even 6 hours, it wouldn't hurt to do a couple stretches, pulling your shoulders back.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's tedious, it's hard, especially when we have obligations. The last thing we want to do is stretch, but it does help, and it adds up over time.
Even if it's like a minute.
Even if it's a minute, yeah. I mean, really and truly, going back to text, based off textbook, we're meant to stretch, I think, 2 or 3 times a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't know
for
that.
a really good benefit of it. Now, that's really hard to do, and it's not long. It's probably roughly 10 minutes long. But
okay. Damn, I didn't know that.
I know I don't do that. I need to do it more, but yeah, 2 to 3 times a day.
I think of soreness when it comes to stretching, like, oh, that just means you have to stretch your body, your muscles are tight.
Yeah.
Is that what's going on when you're sore?
So soreness is, to get a little deep in context here, the soreness you feel later is what we call delayed onset muscle soreness, also referred to as DOMS, abbreviation for that. And DOMS is delayed onset muscle soreness, is that delayed response to breaking down those muscle fibers or stretching those muscle fibers. Okay. And for years we thought, oh, the more DOMS we have, the more delayed onset muscle soreness, the more benefit.
Right.
The whole no pain, no gain mentality.
Yeah.
And that is false. Although it does break the muscle fibers down a tremendous amount, there's really not a lot of evidence nowadays, especially, that shows that that's a lot of muscle growth. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sore today. My legs are sore from a heavy leg day, but it doesn't mean everything, right? You don't have to be sore to have growth. But that delayed onset muscle soreness usually is onset, but from 24 to maybe 48 hours, maybe even longer sometimes, depending on the intensity. But that's kind of where that soreness comes from.
Okay. So, like, what do you...
And it's from breaking down the muscle fibers.
Right. So what do you recommend for sore days? Like, is it just stretching and that's it kind of thing?
No, you can do various things. There's many things now in recovery. Stretching is good. I think we hit on this briefly in your last podcast, but we talked about active recovery. I think active recovery, and stretching can be a form of active recovery. It's some form of activity that you do through movement that's low intensity.
Gotcha.
So swimming works really good for people. It's non-weight bearing. Now, not everybody swims, and depending on the time of year, if they have an indoor pool, but walking, as simple as walking is, there's a lot of benefit for walking, stretching. Any activity for 30 to 60 minutes is good. Okay. You can go as deep as cold plunge is really popular now. Yeah. A little more intense, yeah. Sauna, breath work.
So all those things are good for...
Red light therapy is good, which I don't know too much about red light therapy, but yeah, there's a series of things you can do for recovery that some people take advantage of in their off days.
Speaking of walking, now, okay, so the active, what is it? Active recovery.
Yeah.
When, let's say your shoulders are sore, right?
So
going, is walking?
Yeah, I recommend
because that's more like legs, right?
Yeah, I recommend people do more of a bear crawl though.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I think some movement's good. Yeah, that's a great question in terms of like, well, my legs aren't sore, but my shoulders are, and I'm walking for recovery and stuff. I think part of that is just coming down to stretching.
Gotcha.
Through movement, yeah, especially if there's soreness in the upper body. But then that's where, swimming can come into play. Some people would, I know numerous people now, it's a fad, even though I don't get into it as much as pickleball.
Right.
A lot of my clients, a lot of individuals elsewhere love pickleball, and that is their active recovery style.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's upper, it's lower, it's all over the place. You have a fun time, but sauna does really good too. The red light therapy is really popular now.
Okay.
Normatex, you probably see us with Normatex with the pressures based off recovery.
Oh, right.
The sleeves at the gym.
Yeah,
Normatex tend to be good.
Gotcha.
You can get in as deep as any myofascia release. That's some sort of, as a coach and what I've done over the years, I think myofascia release is good. So that would be more with the Theraguns, more massage work.
Right.
That could help.
So
or even foam roller.
Gotcha.
Type stretches.
So wherever you're having the soreness, doing some type of light active in that area is what's going to kind of benefit.
Yep, it's going to work out that connective tissue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's get into the next thing is like fat burning supplements. I know that's like a big thing in America especially, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're unhealthy. It feels unhealthy to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's all chemicals, I think.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think if you weigh out the pros and cons, right? If you can list out the pros to a fat burning supplement and you list out the cons to it, I think the cons outweigh the pros. So I don't think it's worth it. I think it makes you stray away from what's important, the foundation, the diet, the activity, the training, the supplementation properly. I think it makes you lose your focus on that, and it makes you focus kind of on the wrong things, essentially.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan of them, although, in my younger days, I did take them. Everybody has, to an extent, mess around with it.
Sure.
It depends on what type of fat-burning supplements. I haven't looked into it recently, but most of the times they're just caffeine, right?
That raise your heart rate kind of thing?
That raise your heart rate. But like I said, I'm not too knowledgeable on the fat burning supplements, but I do know that if you weigh it out, they're not as effective as a good, solid diet with a good foundation.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have more longevity over time from just a good diet and a good training regimen.
I think when it comes to fat burning supplements, it's a lack of patience. Right?
Yeah.
Because people want to get that off and stuff like that. And so I think people just have to realize that, like, have more patience with yourself.
Yeah.
And take those small steps in order to get to where you want to go.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So in talking about like weight loss and stuff like that, I know like people, like if, for example, if they have a gut, right? They do more crunches to get rid of that and stuff like that. Like there's no specific kind of thing to get rid of one specific area. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think, the fat cells shrink over time through proper diet, through training. If you remember the quote that said abs are made in the kitchen. Do you remember that?
Right, yeah.
I would, to an extent, disagree.
Oh, really?
Abs are built in the kitchen, but abs are built in the gym, but they're shown in the kitchen. That's what I always say.
Gotcha.
You don't want to have a strong core, and that is shown through your dedication, through, of course, your diet. That's the main part. That's where it's shown.
Yeah.
But they're built in the gym to an extent.
Gotcha.
So, I think there's certain areas that we can pinpoint. It's hard to pinpoint fat more so. You're more so pinpointing muscle, and it's hard to pinpoint fat. You don't really work that, but it can shrink over time, and depending on what you work and how you're working. But a lot of times, like, certain fat in certain areas could be from as simple as hormonal. Not saying it is, but it could be from that stuff. So I would always recommend somebody get more hormonal type checking or a blood panel. But Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint it. I wouldn't necessarily say pinpoint an area. Now, I would pinpoint a muscle group. That's what I would pinpoint. But in terms of fat, that's going to come with proper diet. There might be some areas you just have to work out harder.
Right. And then like you got stress there as well. Like for me, like I'm very self-aware of my body and what it does.
Yeah.
And I realize that when I'm stressed, I can feel it in my body. You know,
Yeah.
I just feel like,
Yeah, same.
you know, just more heavier and stuff like that when I'm stressed.
Yeah,
So
it just weighs down on you.
yeah, it really
Literally,
does.
yeah.
So yeah, it's just about, you know, kind of realizing it, and then I guess just, you know, like we've been saying, just tweaking little things here and there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, dude, I appreciate you coming through.
Yeah,
again,
it's an honor.
Yeah,
I love being on the show.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I have pleasure having you. If you love this episode, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you didn't like. Maybe you have a different perspective than us and want to kind of share with the world. If you have any questions for Jared here, feel free to comment below and we'll take care of those questions as well. If there's any kind of episode that you want to see in the future, you know, I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk to artists and people who kind of work kind of for themselves, even though like you kind of do work for yourself in a way, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to these people, I want to get an insight into what they do and how it could correlate to the people, the audience, and how it can help everybody out there. So that's kind of like where this is going. So again, I appreciate you coming through.
It's great to be on here again.
And I'll leave you his contact info below. And my name is Riera. This is Inspired Voices, and that's a wrap.